suspects, one armed and the other masked, stole the man's gold chain, bracelet, cell phone and wallet. PC Charles of the St. James Police Station is investigating. Prison officers have been placed on high alert after a voice note surfaced online reportedly recorded inside prison walls, threatening attacks on officers. The recording used coded language and named targets. In response, police conducted a targeted raid at the maximum security prison in Aruca, seizing mobile phones, cannabis and handwritten notes. Police Commissioner Guevara says security is being tightened, with intelligence units on high alert to protect officers on and off duty. Two police officers seen in a viral video transporting a girl to a social event have been cleared of wrongdoing. The police service says the officers acted with permission from their station head and their actions were in line with the service's 2025 to 2027 strategic plan, which emphasizes community engagement. Commissioner Guevara praised the officers for their professionalism and initiative. At a UNC crime consultation in Barataria, citizens raised concerns about defending themselves from intruders. Some mentioned using homemade weapons, mace spray, and even dogs. Homeland Security Minister Roger Alexander acknowledged the legal gray areas, calling some items weapons of opportunity. But Legal Affairs Minister Saddam Hussein urged citizens to stay within the law, warning that excessive force or use of illegal weapons could lead to legal consequences. The session reflected growing public frustration over safety and the need for clearer legislation. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Another day in our Twin Island paradise show. Michael Small, this is Talking Point at WESN. And these are interesting times, which in and of itself, there's a bit of irony because it almost feels like you could have said that for the last, 8 months, year. So we're in a state of emergency. Somehow in a state of emergency, it seems as though crimes are trending. There are trendy crimes during a state of emergency. Kidnapping now seems to be, I don't know what the actual numbers are in totality, right? Because I do believe famously one year kidnappings increased by 100% because they went from one kidnapping year before to two. But in this case, we've had some high profile missing persons cases, let's put it that way. One was not a kidnapping, it was a murder. Then, of course, there was the high-profile kidnapping where the victim was recovered. And we have another kidnapping now where I believe what a family member pointed out, what I was thinking, that a recent uptick in kidnappings in the country, which that is concerning enough. But it's during a state of emergency. So I'm not sure how to take this, to be honest. And this is one of those things we'll just have to wait and see how this ends up. Why is this now trending again? The latest victims are two young men. I'm not entirely sure why they were taken, what they may or may not be involved in, what the criminals thought their family may or may not have had available. And depending on the motivations of the kidnapping, it could point to a level of both sloppiness on the kidnappers. They're not necessarily going after certain targets that I guess to some extent would be more logical, which means therefore that if there's illogic in the decision making, who knows who could be a victim of kidnapping, right? And then the recklessness of it all. It seems like they are not concerned about getting caught, that they believe they have a good chance of getting away. And to what extent will this encourage more reckless kidnappings? Where again, if it's not just going to be the 1% that they're going to kidnap, right? If they're going to try and find, I don't know, anybody that looks like they have even a little bit of money, of course, they're not going to care if it's your entire net worth that you have to give up to get your family member back. And to some extent, that and all might be unreasonable. How does anyone, put all of their net worth into liquid assets fast enough, right? But they might not understand that. They might do it anyway. And it doesn't just, not targeting the upper echelons of wealth in the country. One of the things about that, it's not just about, oh my gosh, what about the normal people? No, it's more that the amount of potential victims is just larger. So that it makes it more difficult for the police to treat with the situation. They can't be on every roadblock. And to some extent, once you cast a wide enough net, it'll just complicate all of the possible permutations of who, what, when, where, how. So, and of course, there will be a lot of people potentially who would not think they would be victims of kidnapping and would not put certain things in place that maybe the 1% might have in place, right? Would not have as much cameras, would not have as much security systems, etc., etc. They might think, oh, I'm just living an ordinary life. But hey, you got a new car. It's not a nice car. It's an average car, but it's a new car. And your house looks well maintained, and you work in an office. Obviously, you may have money. Of course, then this could just, there are other speculations you could have whenever it comes to kidnappings. They will always come to light. I'm not going to say it out loud because I don't want to cast suspicions on the two young men unnecessarily. So let's just end that there. Now, one of the top headlines today, I won't go into too much details, but essentially, and we've heard of this before. This is not the first time we've heard of something like this, but the defense minister has made it a point to speak that an inmate has a 65-inch TV in his jail cell. Has or had. The reason why this is alarming is apparently, usually, when the prison service is criticized, I would imagine this is internal to the national security apparatus. They would say, well, no, it's not being smuggled in by prison officers, it's being dropped by drones. So Defense Minister Wayne Stage, I believe, he was the one that had the all too obvious and ironic question of, well, what kind of drone, I'm paraphrasing, what kind of drone dropped a 65-inch TV? How does a drone get a 65-inch TV over the wall and into a cell? Who installed that? Because that's the other thing, right? It's one thing to have a TV. You gotta have something to play, which means it's hooked up to something. Anything. It could be a mobile device. It could be through the use of the internet through your phone, right? But the point is there's connectivity. Even if it's, I doubt mobile internet is fast enough, which means it probably has to have an internet connection of its own or a cable connection or a USB stick with downloaded movies. I don't know. The point is, it's not just the TV. Where do they get something to play on this TV? And there's two things I want to highlight about this revelation. One, and this is where, again, I am not agreeing with MP Marvin Gonzalez, because he's basically saying the discovery of a 65-inch television in a prison cell exposes serious failings by the government. Well, here's the thing. First of all, I've heard about the TV in the prison cell. It was, I believe, before the election, right? Second of all, you don't have a prison service deteriorate at this point in 2 months. I have gone on the record multiple times to say, hey, UNC, try not to make it seem like you did all these big things within the last 2 months. Obviously, there would be projects that would be flow-overs, as I said yesterday. And there will be negatives that are flow-overs too. Anyone who honestly believes that the prison service went from fine to a whole TV in 2 months. There was a gun, not so, in the prison service. And wasn't the films of the prisoners having parties being filmed by themselves on their cell phones? Like, not just last year, but I think that was a couple years ago. Statements like this. Minister Sturge, this is a quote, should have been providing the nation with a proper explanation on how a 65-inch television arrived in a prison cell and why all security measures that were put in place to prevent this very kind of criminality failed. I think former Minister Gonzalez should know better. Ironically, there's that word again. One of the main criticisms, although this would not necessarily speak to a proper explanation, but one of the main starting points of a proper explanation could potentially be, well, under the PNM administration, national security was a sinking ship. Between the maritime border security, the murder rate, the drug smuggling and usage, the inability to curb illegal marijuana at a time when you decriminalize marijuana. That's like repealing prohibition, but the illegal alcohol smugglers in the United States are still able to run illegal rum for whatever reason. I don't know. And the prison service had its issues. Let's not forget 2 inmates died under strange circumstances. And by strange circumstances, I mean the prisons tried to claim, based on doctors they got, that they died from natural causes. And then, at least in one case, if memory is correct, if not both, no, it came out that those prisoners died from blunt force trauma injuries. The first time, I'm fairly certain, it was the family that got an autopsy that said polytrauma, meaning multiple blunt force trauma injuries. We never got an explanation for that. So this is where politicians need to think long term. And maybe Wayne Stage is thinking long term and he's not necessarily looking to make this a political issue, at least too much. Or maybe he is, and I just haven't gotten to that part. But there were deficiencies in national security under the PNM. It's quite, oh yeah, I forgot. Then there's the commissioner that didn't know how to do anything. And the Brent Thomas affair. It's very interesting that no one gave us an explanation for the Brent Thomas affair. So it's very difficult now to have the moral high ground to say, hey, you need to explain this TV. Well, there's a very good chance this TV was installed, I don't know, more than 3 months ago. You don't overnight turn the prison service into a lapdog to that extent. That has to happen over time. A significant amount of time. And to try to make it seem as though this is a recent development, who believes that? If the PNM had a record of being tough on crime, then maybe there would be an argument to say, hey, we never had a thing like TV in a prison cell. But if my memory serves correct, I could be wrong, but I think you had a gun in a prison cell, and that's almost as bad in some ways and worse in others. I just don't see the logic of trying to go down these arguments in the way in which they're going down with it. And I think this is a mistake. I don't think anyone is really going to buy that jive. I don't know what else to say about it at this point. Also, the Prison Service Association is getting more defensive. His members are being made scapegoats, according to one report. This is the president of the association, Gerard Gordon. He's defending the integrity of his officers, right? He is pushing back against anything that suggests the reason why prisoners were relocated was because security had been compromised. because somehow they were relocated for other reasons. You know, there was an outbreak of chikungunya apparently. That's sarcasm. That's not a statement of fact. Right? There was a raid Tuesday. So we're not even talking about, oh, we found that there was breaches and they had means of communication like cell phones. And because of that, we call an SOE. No, days after they called an SOE and moved the guys, they still raided the maximum security prison and found potentially more cell phones. I would imagine they took cell phones from some of those prisoners when they relocated them. I was at least under that impression. More importantly, there's a whole TV in the prison service, as the Minister of Defense pointed out, who is also a minister in the Ministry of Homeland Security. So he has the authority to speak on internal matters. Technically, it's not in the capacity of Minister of Defense when he speaks on the prison service. How do you get a TV inside without the prison officers being complicit? How? In what world? I understand how you could smuggle weed inside a prison, right? And if you don't do certain checks, because not everybody, I assume, wants to look up another man's body cavity. But I'm pretty sure you can't hide a 65-inch TV where the sun don't shine. That's kind of hard. You know, a corner or two or three or all might stick out. So the prison service is even more egregious with the blatant attempts of trying to just say, oh, well, it's not our fault. Well, who else is there? If there's a reasonable explanation, make it. But just to say, well, you know, most of us are good and trying to downplay the potential amounts of corruption in the prison service, I don't understand. Who do you think is going to believe that at this point? It's on the record. The initial reason for this state of emergency on the record is, at least in no insignificant way, a major part. I wouldn't say it's the whole reason, because there might be elements of the plot, allegedly, outside the prison service, sure, but a major factor was the access to cell phone communications and potentially other means of communications by the inmates. Let's take I think is the first comment today. What is Raji Ali doing while he's in Tetron? Just eating food on holiday, watching TV? Well, here's the thing. There was a prisoner on labor that escaped. And I guess this is one of the things that I kind of pointed out. Putting them on hard labor, depending on what it is not necessarily always that simple. Let's take the other comment. It's the other comment I want to talk about. That TV been there for 2 years with authorization. Or who authorized this? Let me just see what the next one is. Let's go to the next one. Hold on. Let me just see where we're at. It was authorized by former Commissioner Ramuta. But let's go to the one before that. The one before that I didn't speak to yet. The senior officer from Digicel was killed because he removed one. Now, this is the thing. I'm not going to fault prison officers if they want to say, look, it's their difficulties because we are threatened. And I have heard that, I believe, mostly off air, right? And I understand that. There's a reason why in certain Latin American prisons, the prison officers wear balaclavas, to make it more difficult for their identities to be discovered by the prisoners, because they know that that information can get out. Because you would think, oh, well, why does it matter if the prisoners know who the prison officers are? Again, that information can get out. And then They might be at risk, their families might be at risk. I understand all that. But notice the prison association is not speaking to the problem. The problem is we have compromised security in the prisons, in part because there are threats against prison officers, in part because there is corruption. Let's be real. And the fact of the matter is, that's the root cause, not the, oh, don't blame us. There's nothing to see here. We didn't do anything wrong. You basically just sound like, well, conspiracy theorists might go mouthpiece for something. Thou dost protest too much. That's the extreme. The more reasonable speculation would be, well, you're just bad at your jobs. Because it's fine if you all have a problem. It's fine if you all have a challenge. It's fine if you all are under threat. But you're not even speaking to try to deal with that. It's almost like if you want to cover up the fact that you're in an unsafe working condition. You want to cover up the extent that it's unsafe, or the critical factors that makes it extremely unsafe. The critical factors of why the prison officers get attacked more than police officers. What does that mean? How are we supposed to interpret that? TV's been there for 2 years. Yeah, I don't know that. We've heard of that before. We've heard of that before. All right, a couple other things. Guy Griffith said the removal of the prisoners is a surrender to criminals. That is at least partially true. It is a surrender to the fact that the prison service basically cannot be trusted to maintain their detention in the designated prison facilities for the prison service. What does that say? What does that say? That the commissioner of police had to go into the prisons. I believe it is that he went in himself, or at least was overseeing the operation from his office or command center, right? But the police had to go into the prisons, remove these guys, figure out an alternative arrangement. They had to go into the prisons again, I believe on Tuesday, the 22nd, to find more phones after more threats were circulated on social media. We are on the back foot. We are on the back foot, and the weaknesses of the criminal justice system, probably one of the biggest ones, are being highlighted with this situation. And it's very, very, very hard for me to take anything that the previous administration said seriously about this specific matter. Because on all practical levels, this did not happen in 2 months. Whatever it is, whether the plot is real, whether the plot is a hoax, whether the plot is real, but they suppressed it and we'll never find traces of it. All right, a couple of things to get through. The State Police Association, they have concerns about the managing director and founder of a private security company being named the chairman of the Airports Authority. They are concerned that there's a conflict of interest. To some extent, I can understand that. I don't know what precedent is for state board appointments on cases like this. The smaller the jurisdiction is, conflict of interest situations becomes more tricky. But I would at least agree with the State Police Association that it will be a conflict of interest if and when he has to negotiate with private security firms, as he is connected to a private security firm. And the thing with regards to the Interpol watch list story, I think the key point in this, and I was a bit, I guess, negligent, you could say, because I kind of let this point slide. I didn't want to speak on it out of turn too much. Dr. Only had a diplomatic passport, which that is apparently the norm. You are office holder with a diplomatic passport. You leave office, you keep the passport. My thing is not, I understand what Mr. Sanfan said, mistaken identity. The problem is he has something that most people won't have, a diplomatic passport. and a diplomatic passport, at the very least, one would think it would be one, harder to mistake someone's identity when they have a diplomatic passport. That's point number one. Two, somebody else could have his name and date of birth. How many of them look like Dr. Keith Rowley from Trinidad and Tobago, who was at one point head of CARICOM and has done work around the region? And one of the two ministers that spoke to the press that I read did lament the fact that they did not put anything in place to receive him, former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, former head of CARICOM. Diplomatically, he lamented that fact. But how do you detain someone with a diplomatic passport just so? I mean, to some extent, and I don't know what the limits are. What the limits are for diplomatic immunity is not what Hollywood makes it out to be, but and I think that's one of the things maybe someone could explain to me that knows that situation better, right? If it was correct what the officials in Antigua did, detaining him twice, or not. It's not that it's impossible for a politician with a diplomatic passport to not be run afoul of the law. It's just we're not safe, at least with regards to Antigua's side of the equation, because they told Dr. Keith Rowley mistaken identity. Technically, that's not saying he's on a watch list, right? And the current government is saying he's not on a watch list, right? So then, unfortunately, I think that causes the government of Antigua to have a little bit more explaining to do with regards to what exactly happened behind the scenes. The minister said, well, he could speak. Everything that Dr. Keith Rowley said about the incidents in Antigua was true, but they can't necessarily, or they don't want to apparently speak to what happened behind the scenes. And while I still don't think that there's some grand conspiracy, because the grand conspiracy makes no sense, to be honest. Put him on a watch list for what? To accomplish what? Because as soon as he travels, this will happen, and then he's going to run to the press, and you're going to have a negative story on your hands. So why do it? What is the gain? Those that say maybe some other authority, another government, Interpol itself, maybe that has more credence. I don't know. But these are some things that I guess one way or the other, we would like to know. Okay. And Stuart Young brings up a good point. Yes, I said it. Maybe not exactly the point he himself was making, but the point that, look, this transcends politics. Maybe this is not the point he was making exactly. And I'm extrapolating what I think is the real point that he should be making if he's not making it. It would behoove the government to investigate the situation. Because this is one of those things where if it could happen to Rowley, it could happen to you too. And this is one of those things where if you want to leave these windows and loopholes open and these precedents open, or these precedents let them stand, it could come back and happen to you. The Republicans impeached Clinton. So when the Democrats wanted to impeach Trump, while I thought that the actual content of the impeachment was nonsense, the precedent was there, so I said, well, tough luck. Y'all did it. It's kind of hypocritical for the Republicans to complain about Trump's impeachment after what they did to Clinton. It just is. I'd have to agree with the impeachment to have that opinion. So if they want to allow this precedent, not push back against it, not investigate it, assuming they didn't do it, which I don't think they did because it makes no sense. But hey, maybe just because it makes no sense to me doesn't mean that they didn't do it, right? By allowing this to stand, it could happen to you. When you're out of office, all of a sudden, Kamala wants to travel somewhere and mysteriously she is held. It doesn't have to be the PNM or any political party trying to do it. We don't know who did it. So, getting to the bottom of it and dealing with it is to the benefit of everybody. It speaks to the public interest. We want to know exactly what's going on. But it also protects the rights of all political figures of TNT. Let's see if the administration fully understands that. Also, fully investigating it. Hey, if you find something that the PNM might not like, but it just happens to be true, those are the breaks. Transparency works both ways, right? Lack of transparency, on the other hand, also tells us things. It doesn't give us exact details, but it does that one thing. It opens that door that a lot of politicians don't like, and that is it gives us a reasonable starting point for speculation. And if you don't like us speculating on the truth because you don't like it when we speculate negative things about you, maybe you should be more transparent to prevent that. All right. I'll try and save this livestock story for tomorrow. That's on the daily review. Not gonna go to daily review today. And I'll save the NCC situation, which does not surprise me. That's all I'll say about that. The live sport former board situation, the NCC situation, does not surprise me. The one thing I'll say about it before I welcome our guests today to close out the week is that I will be somewhat surprised if there are any meaningful consequences over these situations that will then invoke or provoke or encourage any sort of substantial resolution and meaningful change. Or in about 3 to 5 years, we'll probably get similar stories of this nonsense. I mean, maybe the live sport, you could argue we've gotten similar stories about it, in the last 10 years, easy, but not quite the same, similar, right? How you define similar, how I define similar, does not really the same thing. With that said, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome disaster management expert, as well as, a guy that spent a little bit of time in the police service, Ashraf Ali. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WESN show. Michael Small from Tobago. We'll be right back after this.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world. Diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title. It's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
And we're back here, Talking Point from Sandy Point. Sean Michael Small joining me in studio. We have our disaster management expert, Ashraf Ali. Morning, Ashraf.
Sean, how's Tobago treating you? Enjoying the waters in Tobago?
Too hot. The sun is too hot.
You made sure you went and take a look.
I'll leave it at that. The sun is too hot.
Too hot, you see.
You need to stop listening to the fake producers in your ear.
Listen to me. Sometimes, based on the weather conditions, a little sun is beneficial, you know.
I like to not melt as a matter of policy. Also, it's not always good for my migraines.
Yeah, all right, okay.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
So
you have migraine?
Never a dull moment, as we've ironically been saying, I don't know, for the last how many months, with regards to the current situation of the country. We're in a state of emergency. One of the things that I pointed out earlier is that it seems to be an uptick or a perceived uptick in kidnapping during a state of emergency. That said, though, however the state of emergency is perceived, there is a situation that I have said more than once at this point. I don't necessarily see the two state of emergencies being quite that dissimilar. And I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. And I know the politicians are trying to say, well, their state of emergency was great, but the other person's state of emergency was flawed. Because to me, it comes down to one very unfortunate realization over the course of talking about various different situations, from the anti-gang legislation to the noise pollution situation, to smoking weed in public places and the lack of law enforcement's ability to handle that. And that is, there seems to be deficiencies in our legislation and policies and regulations, or whatever they are, in the various different aspects of the criminal justice system. And when things get too serious, we have these deficiencies, so we push the panic button and call for state of emergency to try to compensate. But the problem is, as you pointed out, and as David Abdullah also pointed out, maybe not exactly for the same reasons, you can't just have SOEs to try to deal with any issues you have with policing, because we can't be under a perpetual state of emergency. So what's going to happen when are the times in between? And to some extent, it'll kind of be ridiculous if it's a state of emergency, but we have like 2 to 3 state of emergencies a year. Is it really an emergency at that point?
Well, first things first. A state of emergency when in terms of disaster management and critical incident management, it means that we are in a crisis situation. A state of emergency is a crisis situation. How we manage this state of emergency, whether it's in the first 15 days or the first 3 months, will depend on whether or not you have proper control of the state of emergency and the intended the objectives of a state of emergency. And I want to show you the similarities when you're developing an action plan to deal with an incident. In an incident, you must have some clear objective. When an incident occurs, you must have some clear objectives how you want to achieve stabilization of the incident and bring it to a reasonable situation. If you are utilizing the same principle for the state of emergency, I would expect in the next 3 months, with the extension of the first 3 months, I should say, you should have been able to reach a particular position to say that, listen, the objectives have been achieved. Anytime you have to extend a state of emergency, it means that you have to reevaluate what your objectives was and say, listen to me, we have not achieved our objectives and we have to keep on continuing. The longer you take to get the situation under control, it means that you really do not have control of a situation. You never really had proper control of the situation, and you just keep on extending the periods and extending the periods. A state of emergency should never be used as a tool for policing. It should never be. It is not a policing strategy. A state of emergency is used for specific reasons. We have attempted coup. There was a pandemic we had it for. There was a rise in violence in terms of, it could have been some unrest, violent crime, violence and gang activities. Fair enough, we can use that because if it shows that there is in fact some situation that would upset the normal run-ins of Trinidad and Tobago, that is what the state of emergency is used for. A state of emergency cannot be and should never be utilized as a policing tool because it gives you extraordinary powers for a state of emergency that the normal policing does not have. So it simply means, it simply means that your normal policing policies and procedures is not capable to effectively manage the situation. That is what a state of emergency is utilized for.
Well, consider this. One, the family of a kidnapping victim lamented what I believe I should say it, that they perceive an uptick in kidnappings. And we've had a couple of high-profile kidnappings hit the press in the span of, a week and a half or something like that. But then also, there's something about the fact that when the last 2 state of emergencies occurred, what was the first thing on people's mind? Is there curfew? And in both cases, the governments of the day said, no, you all go and live your life like normal. So we have a crisis and a state of emergency that is technically not affecting the everyday people. And in fact, in some cases, they're seeing major crimes affect them more, or they are potentially have cause to be afraid of major crimes affecting them more, right? At some point, this is, as David Abdul put it, it's the boy who cried wolf too many times, and when there really is a wolf, people didn't take him on. I'm starting to think that the population is looking, if we continue on this trend, state of emergency, no curfew, no other measures to really impact the lives of the people, we'll start to think, is it really a crisis? Is it really an emergency? We'll start to take it for granted, right? And then when it really is an emergency now, and they have to put in more stringent measures, and they want to say, and we need you to support and cooperate. That's what the commissioner said, support the state of emergency. But we can't see the crisis. And at some point, it's not that we don't want to respect the state of emergency. It'll be like what David Abdul said, the boy who cried wolf too many times, and when there really is a wolf now, we're just not going to take it on. And to some extent, I think that goes for the criminals as well, right? It seems as though whatever the crime situation is this time, it's already reached the point where the state of emergency suppressed it from January. And it doesn't look like they could suppress it any further, especially if a significant amount of their attention is for that specific threat. So it's a hell of a thing for our population to sit back and be, we're under state of emergency. But hey, them 2 boys get kidnapped. Granted, the police responded to it. They escaped. Like, I don't know how much more you could have asked the police service then, but like, I fear that this is a slippery slope where at some point we're going to have an emergency. The public isn't going to take it for granted. Then the politicians are going to not want to go all out because they don't want to upset the public, right? Who have new levels of expectations of what a crisis means, because a crisis no longer means what it used to mean. Now it just means, well, you all just declare a thing and you all deal with it behind the curtain. We don't want to feel nothing. So any politicians are going to be like, well, we can't put these measures in place because the public expects to not be affected. And then what's going to happen if you're running a crisis by trying to appease the public? It's like the mayor who didn't want to close the beaches in the movie Jaws.
Exactly. So it is not going to give, and I said it is not going to give the value, and you're not going to see the value of what it's supposed to what it's supposed to present. I mean, you are right. We have been accustomed to a certain level of homicides per year. Unfortunately, we became a little numb to some of the circumstances. Are we going to say that, listen to me, you implement something like a state of emergency? A state of emergency should never be something that everybody is comfortable with. A state of emergency you're putting a state of emergency because of the context of an emergency. We have to implement extraordinary measures and powers that are given under a state of emergency. It cannot be business as usual. And on the first occasion that the first state of emergency, 2024 to 2025, I understand that you didn't want to upset, because we just came out of a pandemic and it was very difficult on the finances and the economics of a lot of persons. So you didn't want to interfere with that aspect of it. So you're saying state of emergency to deal with criminal elements. But if the criminal elements are free to roam, to move as they please and commit offenses as they please, then the state of emergency is just words. Now in this circumstance, you're saying that we want a state of emergency because of a particular significant national security threat, where certain caliber of individuals, status quo, certain persons and certain areas, lives were at threat. Fair enough. But are you telling me that the lives of these persons alone is more valuable than the lives of everybody else? The average citizen is not named on the listing, but they are the ones being targeted also. So we have to be balanced when it comes to this. I am not taking any sides. But I'm being very practical as to how it appears and the consequences of when you're putting in place a state of emergency, saying one thing and it is not reflective on the other. Because
I just want to make this point. The whole reason for the last two states of emergency, really and truly, normal policing should have been able, when I say normal, obviously we're not talking about day-to-day traffic enforcement here, right? But the police should have already had the capacity to deal with things like this. You know, if it reached the point where it's like a coup or an attack on the Red House or something, or Whitehall or whatever, all right, that's different. But if there's a plot to say that you need to go to a state of emergency to investigate it, right? Or to say there's runaway crime, you need a state of emergency to arrest the violence. But we're not talking about, you know, armed gangs on the street like in Haiti. We haven't reached that point yet. These are things that normal policing should have been able to prevent. Is that reasonable to say?
It is not reasonable to say, and a reasonable thinking person would say, yes, this is what it is supposed to be. And why after the first state of emergency earlier this year, it was to deal with gangs and the potential of gang rivalry and the flare-up of gangs.
Right.
What have the law enforcement agencies done since the first state of emergency up to the last state of emergency, where they could not have, or did they address the upsurge or the criminal elements, because let's be real, you know. This state of emergency is targeting the same criminal elements that was his first state of emergency was targeting. It and nobody knew.
That's a good point.
Right?
That's a good point.
And for the last 5-6 years, let us be practical and be real. They are the same criminal elements and the same names and the same so-called leaders, community leaders and the so-called individuals and the crime bosses and the gang members, the main gang members, who are currently still actively functioning in Trinidad and Tobago. They have not changed. So now the only thing that's happening is that the average citizen has to be placed under additional stresses because you are not addressing the criminal elements. State of emergency is for everyone. A state of emergency cannot be for a particular group. Unlike Jamaica, a state of emergency went into a country where curfew was instituted in a particular geographical location, and everyone who lives in a geographical location felt, both law-abiding and criminal element, felt the consequences of that state of emergency. Where's the consequences of a state of emergency in Trinidad and Tobago? All it did is just give the police officers, give the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and law enforcement officers such as the Defense Force the opportunity to exercise additional powers. What additional powers do you need? And just to make it abundantly clear, Sean, if the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service requires additional powers to execute its normal functions, then it means something is absolutely wrong with the systems and the way the law and the function of the law. So that is what we have to address. We have to address the laws.
That's the point I was trying to make when I asked you the question. Like, what is it with this? Because these are supposed to be extra powers, additional powers, not normal powers. Now, I want to take the last comments, if you can, Master Control. Oh, I'm cutting out the comment there. Let me read it. I don't agree. Police want unrestrained power to do what they want, so perpetual SOE. Now, I wouldn't necessarily agree with this, and to some extent, I don't think it's really up to the police. You have too many politicians that have to sign off on it. I think it's more on the case of legislation doesn't know how to solve the problem on their end, but the issue is the problem is, at least to some extent, on their end with legislation. So we have what it seems like a perpetual SOE, but this is one of those funny things where, think about it, I don't know how this would have worked if the last SOE was extended to 6 months and then we came here in July. Would it even be proper to have another SOE? Because this is somewhat unprecedented, right? To have 2 SOEs in 2 years. But I wouldn't say that the police want to perpetuate it.
So
Ashraf?
When I'm saying, I'm not specifically dealing with the police per se. I'm using law enforcement as a body. Because targeting one aspect of law enforcement will be unfair to either sides. We have to acknowledge, and yes, the prison service has to take their part of the responsibility in this whole circumstance, right? I agree that the Prison Association came out and spoke about it. The prison commissioner did in fact indicate that there are rogue elements within the prison, but stating there are rogue elements in the prison doesn't change the fact of what is taking place in our prison systems, and it did not happen today. It has been happening for a number of years, and we have been saying it over and over. How come that prisoners are able to make calls, communicate directly, go on social media and make videos on social media from the prison to the prison, and nothing has been done about it significantly, because all you do is just go in there, you get rid of these cell phones, and all of a sudden everybody has cell phones again. So then are you telling me that there's a service provider, that somebody's a service provider within the prison service? So you lost cell phone today, so you're going to get a new cell phone tomorrow? Come on, man, let us be real.
So this is another thing. because I myself at times try to defend things from unreasonable criticism, right? Whether it is, I could be bad talking a PNM politician, but then I'm like, but hold on, but on this area, they're right. So let's not bash them over the internet. Hey, let's not totally bash the police for this situation. Not all cops are bad. But with the prison service, and I understand, the explanation, the unofficial explanation is their lives are threatened. The official explanation is we don't bring the contraband in, it's brought in via drones, right? To which, as I said earlier, Minister Stage had a good point. How do you bring a 65-inch TV in via a drone? But the point is, I understand that there might be threats and challenges prison officers face and dangers, but they're not necessarily looking to solve those situations. So whatever pity or understanding I would have had for them, that's kind of, it's difficult for me to maintain it when their defense is, well, you know, it isn't that bad and we're not all that bad and we're doing our best. And as you pointed out, but the problems are still there. The breaches in security are still there. And now, I guess, and people might say this is where the system is kind of hypocritical, we have a state of emergency when the breaches of security in prisons are part of a threat to people outside of the prison service.
Not outside the prison service alone. When specific persons of different categories are named, not the average citizen, because you're talking about high officials. Why does it become so critical because high official names have been mentioned? Come on, let's be real. Because hits have been done from prison to the average citizen. Witnesses have been killed.
Right.
Prison officers have been targeted. Other persons have been targeted within the walls inside the walls of the prison. So wasn't that a situation that we needed to address when those things were happening? Is it only because a particular names have been mentioned and particular category of individuals? Now we're talking about state of emergency. Let us be realistic. We have critical situations, or we have a crisis. So this is a crisis within a crisis. We have a crisis in the prison system. We have a crisis within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service when it comes to managing how effective they are to deal with the criminal elements. We have a crisis we have a crisis in Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to crime, right? And we need to manage it holistically. There must be hard decisions, and I would say that I applaud this Commissioner of Police for the stance that he have been taken. Now, he will be under some serious criticism in the manner in which he make his stance, but I am simply saying he is speaking from a position of authority, and he is willing to accept whatever fallout in terms of public opinion as to how we treat it. But at the end of the day, we have reached a stage where we are only talking about the criminal elements doing this and the criminal elements doing that, and we can't take control. And when time to take control, the public is going against, and the public want to go against. So what do you really want? A state of emergency, we should not have the amount of freedom that you have, because the situation is critical that you do not want freedom. So let me add this state. If the criminal elements make a call to deal with a particular individual, when if there's a state of emergency without a curfew, isn't the criminal elements free to roam anytime and look for the individual, and the individual is free to walk out the streets at any particular time he feels and go anywhere he wants? Because there's no curfew. The curfew is not there to put to add stresses on you, you know. The curfew is there for a reason, also for a means of protecting you to not to go outside and get it. So it has its reasoning. But
I would go to the opposite, because there's the very real concern that, look, certain industries and economic activity at night, coming out of the pandemic, they haven't really recovered to the levels before the pandemic. And that affects your total the taxes you could collect, your economic activity and development, money circulation, you know, entertainment options for the population. I get all that. All of those things are important. Now, the situation is critical, so I don't disagree with you. Listen, if we say we need a state of emergency, we should do it properly. Like at some point, if we have a real crisis of crime on our hands, by having a curfew, what it does is it limits who can move around at night. And at the very least, logistically, it makes it easier to police, because then I don't need as extensive a night shift to try to cover as much people moving around freely, you know, at the nighttime hours. That is just one aspect or one benefit of it. Now, but the thing is, if we want to take the economic concern seriously and the crime concern seriously, rather than having a half-baked state of emergency, why not have, I don't know, Parliament spend all night into the next day, into the next night, if they have to have subcommittees, meetings, proposals, whatever, right? Reach out once again, try and do the crime talks. If the other side decides they don't want to do it, that's up to them. But you do have at least a 2/3 majority in Parliament to look at the legislation and start to make some changes. Because with regards to the gang situation, we have an anti-gang bill that, for all intents and purposes, might as well as not exist, because I don't think we've had any convictions by it. And I think we've only had one case successfully taken to trial because of it. And let's be real, I don't think it's reasonable to say that the TTPS is that incapable that they can't make arrests. There has to be something wrong systemically that is preventing them from arresting anybody, except for like one or, you know, whatever handful of people they've done over the years with regards to being in a gang. There has to be something deficient in the system or the process that's limiting, because it's illegal to be a gang in this country, so that it makes no sense that we have gang violence.
Well, so they say, so then we shouldn't have, well, I agree, we shouldn't have gang violence, but this state of emergency, in the manner in which we keep using the state of emergency, because it is not and I keep on saying this is not a policing tool, and it should never be used as a policing tool. You have a limited amount of time to enter someone's house without a warrant during the state of emergency. Is it that you're telling me? Is it that
we have a caller, so we'll take the call. But I agree with you. It's not a policing tool. I think it's to compensate legislature. So that just speaks to your point. But Diego Martin is on the line. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, Sean. And
morning.
I'm not too sure how I should address this. Is it a former ASP or a current ASP?
You could simply say Ashraf. Mr.
All
Ali.
right. A couple of things I want to. Okay, I get a lot of feedback, but a couple of things I want to address. The prison service, and by extension, the failure of the TTPS for a while. So let me address the prison service first. In 2019, December the 4th, the former Attorney General, who eventually became Minister of Agriculture or local government, I believe in Parliament, but it is on the newspaper, that he said a sweep of the prison service identified a couple of things. One, the preferred communications of the prisoners were not necessarily phones. It was high-speed internet. The second startling thing, he said he discovered TV, I think a 40-inch or 50-inch. I wanted to find out if corrective action, preventive action, a report on that was done. If that was done, we have it repeated, because they see the problem and nothing was done. Let me get back to the TTPS directly, because I believe the TTS is now showing signs of fixing their own internal issue. They have policing. That has collapsed. Nothing came out of that. Nobody was disciplined. The 1990 coup, did the police do its own internal investigation? Was it put into the public place, or where they fell short? Those are things you have to do your corrective action and try to prevent it from recurring. So I'm saying no more. The third issue, how the phones got back into the system, into the prison. Yes, we're slapping up a lot of the prison officers and the management. It have another key area that I think people looking. The service providers that who moves the prisoners to and fro the court and all over the place. Is that security firm vets all their personnel and employees, and is our national security apparatus vetting those people also? Because it's easier going down there in a van with 2 private security. Hey, easy money pass. Hey, take this now. Because you hand over that security of prisoners to a third party, and we don't know how effective have any of our national security personnel do an audit of these people providing security for the state. That is an essential question. That is why a lot of things is collapsing. OSHA has collapsed because they don't do no surveillance audits on the fire that happened in Rampo. I am sure, as a person far out of it, if I go inside there, they have not done any recent audits. I'll go and have a nice morning.
Well, that last point with the private security, I think that's a good one as well. At least, I don't think it's unreasonable to say whatever threats or bribes that prison officers are susceptible to, private security guards would most likely also be susceptible to, right?
So you just add, you just add a third avenue of opportunity for the criminal elements. There are a lot of, don't be naive. There are lots of opportunities outside of the blaming the prison officers themselves to go for items to reach into the prisons, right? But at the end of the day, the ultimate responsibility would lie with the members of the prison service. So yes, they'll have to be held accountable for that action. It means that they have to put in as much systems, not that they don't have, but they still have to put in much more systems to counter and mitigate against these type of things continuously happening.
We don't have another caller. I'll just say this. TTPS is showing signs of fixing their internal issues. I don't know what that might be, because when you have a commissioner that knows how to do things, anything, that's already gonna fix something, at least one thing, if not more. We have a remoney line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Morning, sure.
Morning.
Morning, officer.
Morning.
Officer, I want to thank you for reiterating all the points I've been making.
Caller?
I just muted the television.
Okay.
No, I just muted the television.
Yeah.
Right? And what I want to say is this. The greatest change we had to make in this country is changing behavior. Because we had to go way back to 62. This democratic socialism that we be practicing here. Yeah, and to change the behavior of the citizens of this country in all spheres, including in this changes their attitudes. And I say so because economics drives crime. And if you look at the cost of items in the prison, take for example cigarettes, narcotics, down to the phones. It is tempting for a prison officer to take that chance. I was having a discussion with a past student of mine. Yeah, we were having some repairs in school and he came to help. But he's a member of the alumni and we were discussing the same thing. And he asked me, he said, so what do you think we should do? And I said, son, if I really tell you the answer, you go doubt it. I said, but look at it this way. I said, imagine you have a wife. You work here and you provided everything. You want her to work and she don't want to work. How you getting her to get a job? He said, I don't know, so the other die. I said, so when you die, and she has no other source of income, she'll have to get up off of her backside and look for a job. I said, well, if I was a prison officer, and I am outside the cell and you inside, and you telling me what I have to do, and if I don't do it, what could happen? I said, well, when I look at it, somebody had to go in, and I think you go in before me. I was real with him that morning with that discussion. But the long and the short is this. We have to make jail hard. Prison has to become unattractive. So that when a man is going into prison, hear what is going on. This ain't Hilton I'm going to. I ain't going and lie down and rest and call my friend and them and play video game and smoke and no. I must be able to get up 4 o'clock every morning. I have a vehicle to catch because going on some site, if it's a beach to clean with some empty lot, I have work to do if it's a garden to plant. Because at $20,000 a month to maintain these people in prison, and this is what they're doing. I say we are going nowhere fast. We are going nowhere fast at all. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a good weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you, caller.
Same to you. Sean?
Now, it's interesting, Ashraf, that he said that, because one of the things I was thinking about was, you know, at some point, if you threaten the prison service too badly and you make them look too bad, they may push back in ways against the prisoners in ways that are not necessarily legal. Secretly, of course. But what I find very interesting was the suspect that was arrested after the attack on the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons. He ended up dead in prison service custody. But yet, outside of those 1 or 2 situations, which are far too extreme, so I'm not condoning it, it seems like the prison service are quite fine with being victims. and again, I'm not advocating that they become vigilantes in their own, in the prison institutions. But there's something that I find quite odd and academically interesting, that the prison service is potentially being victimized to this degree. And maybe it's unreasonable to think that they are, and then that means that you have to go to, well, maybe it is mostly corruption.
You see, sometimes it's the reality of when you give an explanation for something, or I should say, when you give factual information about an organization, it appears that you're making excuses.
Yeah.
Right? It is unfair, and I would say it is unfair, the manner in which the unfounded criticisms of the general public on certain persons about law enforcement, the prison service, the defense force, the fire services, the fire service, the prison service, the police service, the Trinidad Defense Force. Because I will tell you, for a person who have been here for a number of years, over 25 years plus, only time you know the organization inside out is you have to be in it. You have to understand. You will once you are here, you will understand the challenges that these men and women face on a daily basis. The prison service is not an easy place to operate from, right? So I am not blaming the officers alone. The organization itself, and when you're talking about the organization, we as Trinidad and Tobago, we have to say that, listen, we have to take some blame because, listen, the prison service is the Trinidad and Tobago prison service. It's not no foreign prison service. We have allowed a lot of things to happen and continue to happen in the organization, in that organization. We keep blaming the officers. We keep blaming the officers. But the officers have been coming out and saying that the conditions that they are working in is not up to par. Let us be real. There is a legal document, which is a Prison Service Act. There's a law. Remand prisoners are not convicted prisoners.
Well, we have a caller, but I'll say that's the flip side to the point I was making. To some extent, ironically, it might show that the prison service officers are not willing to go too far, even with threats on their life potentially, and it's commendable.
It is commendable, but
we have a caller. We have San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Mr.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
I'm not going to dive into all of this, but I'm just going to say what Arima said. We have to make prison hard because it is too. We've been dealing with this problem for too long. This started off in a case where prison officers were it was easy to take something and carry for a prisoner, so that you know somebody who know a prisoner and you carry something for them. And this thing got out of hand, and it morphed into what it is now, to the point where the police service have to be intervening regularly in the prison service to try and control things. I should tell you how bad the prison service has gotten, that the police service have to help them do their job. Now, that being said, it's something I want to discuss with you, Mr. Ali. I want you to put on your disaster management hat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that fire at Ramco yesterday, you know San Fernando. I would imagine that you would know San Fernando because you would have worked in this area before, right?
Yeah, I know San Fernando to some extent.
Okay, so you know the Duncan Village area where Blenheim Supermarket and the gas station is on top of the hill there.
Okay.
There's a buffer, there's a piece of land of that buffer behind that Ramco gas facility coming up the hill to Duncan Village Main Road.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was going to the gas station last night when I got a call from one of my kids saying, "Daddy, there's a fire at Ramco." I said, "Fire at Ramco?" She said, "Yes. We saw it when we were coming home. So the fire was going on for a while." When I came up on Duncan Village Main Road from Laramie side, or from Bamboo Junction, Bamboo Village side, you know, there were so many people, Mr. Ari, by that piece of land. They were inside because there's a couple of gates. They got access and went into the land so they could see properly, and people were filming. The gas station was closed because they closed up, but there were so many cars parked alongside by the gas station, by the other buildings there. People parked up and people were filming with their phones. And I was amazed that that main road from Duncan Village Junction back down the hill to by the bypass was not closed off. Because I was surprised that nobody understood, or these people didn't understand the extent of that was how dangerous that facility is down the hill there. And what can happen if there was a loading bay they had a problem with. If it is one of those bullets down the hill that is storing that LPG had exploded. Let me just say this. LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, when it gets in contact with the atmosphere from that liquefied state, it expands 270 times on average. The seriousness of a fire and harm to people and property in that entire area. And I was surprised that the police and the fire combined did not understand that they had to take those precautions. I want you to speak to that in a disaster management setting, because that plant is actually in a residential area, and that plant has been there for quite a while. Because when they had the other plant on on crossing that had a similar fire and explosion. They moved it to the back there. That other plant, that was about 35 years ago, 40 years ago, that other plant exploded and they moved it to the back there. After that plant was there, has been there for so long, the government of Trinidad and Tobago saw it fit to put a housing area, which is Union Hall, to put a housing area right next to this plant. They have houses 50 meters away from that plant, starting 50 meters from that plant. And I would like you to speak to the situation where these are things that we are not seeing assessments being taken place for these type of plans and action plans being implemented when you have a similar situation like that fire. Have a good day. I'll listen off it.
Sean, unfortunately, as the caller said, it may take some serious incident for us to recognize that we should not have been that plant. Even where the plant is located, it must have a buffer around the area, right? I was in communication with some of my colleagues who from the fire service who was actually dealing with the incident there, and they did in fact get the fire under control in a very short space of time. But it's unfair to them to say that they were not indicating the buffer zone that has to be put in place. They would have implemented the buffer zone because under their incident command system, they would have indicated, they knew that what they were dealing with and the level of buffer that they wanted. However, the problem that we continue to face is not one-sided alone. It's when everybody who's dealing with it is not understanding the severity and the consequences or the risk associated with it. Because everybody wants to videotape and everybody wants the best shot to get. Should a cylinder actually got explode and it went up in a projectile into the air, residential areas in and around the area, and then all those persons who in and around the area, they could have been casualties at the same time, where it would have now added to the incident. Right? Unfortunately, there's only 4 persons got seriously injured from the reports always injured, and the situation was controlled. It could have been worse, where you have all these individuals who are very in close proximity to the plant wanting to videotape. Now, just like everything else, is macro traffic. Everybody, we just don't want to understand that it is a risk. Do not stay so close to the sea or stay away from it. And I think, I always say that the reason why we behave in this manner when it comes to disasters and disaster management and all of that is that we never had any significant disaster, anything significant for us to understand how serious it is. The most of us have floods.
We have another call. However, I'll just also add to that, because this is what I thought from the perspective of the culture of God is a Trinity. I'm going to put it that way. The culture of God is a Trinity. We have Santa Cruz on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. I'll expand after. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
What I want to just say, right, is that I find right now the prison system where we have this problem here, we need to build a special place where we house these prisoners, just like how they do outside in certain countries. And you do not put Trinidadians to look over them. You bring in some contractors from outside, they work. If it's a year, they go back. We want them here again. They bring somebody else so they wouldn't get to be known and get to be contaminated. I think that is the way we'll have to look at it. And something I want to touch, I know I'll only touch on one thing. I heard that the NCC, they're talking about NCC where this set a recurring debt. If we putting out money and we are not making money, that's craziness. At least we just quick the ball culture. At least try to break even. I cannot understand why Trinidad just have pan on our streets and talking about freeness, and as a competition and you want millions of dollars for competition. They're not raising that money. Come in the savannah, habit in the savannah, you see that certain thing they call it drag, pay to be there. If it's a 150 or what it is, pay to be there. You do just something, and there's ways I watch the American how they do certain thing, and they have the police where they move things in advance, no guns, and they move up the bands quickly. They move this, they put the chain, the railings. You're nothing. Get out behind. Don't be here. Do have sharpness and everything move quickly and everything. We have to come to that. If you love your culture, pay money. You have to pay. Nothing is free. It's thousands of players and they want money. I think we can't be just pulling. Mass players is the same way. You have to have your car. You ever see North Stand Carnival Monday and Tuesday? Empty. Grandstand, you can count people on your hand. And we have to correct all these indifferent. People go back. Always culture. No, always this is that, but But one thing I could say about the state of emergency, by me, 10 o'clock, the place is quiet. You know, it's stuff. And people, it are people who of concern, you don't see them. Bless you.
Thank you, caller. Well, ironically, I was thinking similar thoughts to the caller on the prison service. Not that I think that it's easy or necessarily practical, but then again, you know, sometimes solutions don't necessarily have to be obviously practical. If depending on how extreme the problem is the problem that extreme to bring in foreign contractors? Because that will have a whole other, then it will be if they mistreat any prisoners and human rights violations, and we don't want these people here.
Let me throw an spin into that. So you're bringing somebody from outside to work within the prison service, and they only have a 1-year contract. Okay? What is the level of accountability for 1 year? I am not responsible for anything. I don't have tenure of service. All I have is this, and I have 1 year, so I can make as much money as I want to make 1 year. You may end up exacerbating the situation in a prison service, and it could turn out to be worse. It could turn out to be so. I'm not saying it is. There's a possibility because these persons have nothing to lose. 1 year and they're going about their business, right? Because they're getting a salary and they could do everything else. Those type of solutions, we cannot look at solutions like that when the solution is right here. The solution is that we need to invest, we need to revisit the prison system and watch it. We're talking about people saying making prison hard, and I want you all to remember something. And I have the persons are not listening to the Prison Service Association and members of the prison service. Remand prisoners are not convicted prisoners. They have not been charged. They have their rights. They cannot be treated as a prisoner.
And they're more remand, at least in some facilities, than convicted.
And a number of these incidents are actually happening in the remand area. So I am saying that we need to address the issue of remand. And how do you address the issue of remand? Remand means that the judicial system, together with the law enforcement, police, the judicial system has to work harder to get these persons moved away from remand, to address the remand issue, to convicted or not convicted in the court system. Because this is the challenge you're facing,
We have another caller, a different caller from San Fernando. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Hi, morning.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm calling from Union Hall, San Fernando.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Sean, morning. Good morning to the officer. I live very close to where this incident happened last night, right? I've been living here for the past 21 years. I understand when Ramco had the first incident many years ago. Cylinders were flying in the air and all kind. Last night, my house was rocking with explosions, and I live just on the other side of Ramco over the hill. We started to evacuate our household, and there was no siren, there was no attention given to the residents in the area. And yes, when you build an area like this up around a plant like that, you need to have a proper buffer zone. There is no communication with Ramco and the residents in this area. There are no safety drills. There's nothing of that nature in this area for the residents who live close by. Last night, the evacuation, I watched this yesterday. last night. While I was getting my family out of Union Hall, people were running towards the fire. And I should tell you how we unprepared for disaster and uneducated our folks are in terms of when a disaster is potentially about to take place. So, I mean, we thank the fire services for quick action and bringing things under control. But really, we're not prepared for disaster in this country. And there are things that needs to be put in place, especially when you have industrialized things like this in a residential area. You have to, and I'm not debating that the government must was wrong or right to build a housing area. I had my land here and I built, you know, I never realized Ramco would have come and put on a bigger plant and expanded on that side. And I think that plants like that should have been in an industrialized area. In the United States, an industrialized plant is put in 5 areas with buffer zones and impact zones that are so big. I mean, we don't have the land space here, but people need to understand the community here is a close-knit community, 1, and 2, Ramco has never had anything, any town meeting to advise residents in case of an emergency, this is the way to go, what to do, you will hear a siren. We've never seen safety drills taking place in this area, in this community, for the benefit of the residents. So all these things are important, but never taken into consideration for the residents of the area. So, I mean, they would have the internal plan to evacuate and all that. But the immediate zone that being impacted, they have no idea. There's a gas station right on the hill opposite in Duncan Village, and the police should have cordoned off that area with no traffic and shut down the gas station. And people were standing in front of the gas station taking photos and taking videos of this thing. That's what I'm saying, that we do not have a plan, and there is nobody who's taking responsibility. And we wait till that something happen and then to be reactive than proactive. On the case of the officer talking about the prison, I just want to put my 2 cents here. 1, we still have a hangman, and I don't know if he's paying him. That is 1. 2, we have the FIU. If you want to see where the money going and which officer is getting the money to do certain things, the FIU need to just track people's account, and they will see when big sums of money going into people's account, and suddenly prison officers opening business and they putting taxi on the road and making the wife open her nails thing and her hair thing and all kind of thing. All of a sudden money flowing. We just need to track the money, because at the end of the day, it is about the money. Let me tell you what happened in Brazil, in one county in Brazil. The police was so underpaid that the drug lords were controlling the police force. You know what they did? They raised the pay grade of the police in that certain county, and suddenly the police had the power not to succumb to what the drug lords were offering them pay-wise. This is a money situation, you know. And if you treat the prison officers correctly, you give them the right tools to work with, you raise their pay, they do not have to go to the drug lords to take money and borrow money and get money and all those things. And all these things we are seeing for this SOE is a direct reflection of the corruption in the CPEP URP programs. And if you connect the dots, I am sure the corruption that is being touched there is directly related to gangs and drug lords and guns. And so the government have all the tools, you know, they just are utilizing the tools in the proper manner. And we just sitting down. I don't know why they feel the citizenry dunce. Some people feel we have a dunce citizenry. We don't. We have intelligent people in the citizenry who have the ability to look on and assess, and we have experienced people in citizenry, retirees who can learn to this thing, but they don't regard that. So we continue to go wrong in our cycle here. God bless you, gentlemen, and have a safe weekend.
Same to you. Lack of societal will, lack of political will. I wouldn't say direct, but I'll say indirect, I believe for sure. That's semantics with regards to CPEP, ERP, and gangs. But more or less, I can't say that everything that you said is unreasonable.
The caller, we got first-hand in accounts of our actual residents in the area, and you realize what he was indicating, that he has been there for almost 20-something years, and since that time, they have not gotten any drills or anything about that, any plans, any drill from the Ramco or anybody in the area to inform them if something happened in an emergency, what to do and what not to do. This is one of the things that we have to be very critical with, because you're talking about disaster management planning. This is part of your planning procedures. This is how you mitigate additional impact of an incident by preparing not only the organization, but the community to work in partnership, because you can't remove both elements from the area, right? Because the housing is there, the company is there, but you have to work in tandem with each other, and this happens across the board when we have industrialization and industries, critical industries, in close proximity to residential areas.
Now, we have another caller, but I'll just say this. Our country is built off of the experience of other countries. So I think on some level, we have not gone through a lot of hard lessons to earn that knowledge. You know, we just kind of extrapolated from others. But you're right. It's not like you reach a point where it stops. Other countries went through and had to learn certain things, even in modern times, yes. Right? And so will we probably, unfortunately. We need to get that mentality. God might be a Trinity, but we have free will. He ain't doing everything for us. We need to understand that. We have Faisal on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning.
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 So first, I want to deal with the prison officers issue. Yes?
Sure, go
ahead.
We can walk, talk, and chew, simultaneously. So we would have recognized to some extent there's a level of corruption taking place within the prison service and the police service. So we have to start with one. The contractual arrangement is one that could work in the short term while we fix the problems. Yes? We can't continue to maintain a problem that is there while we're trying to fix it. We need to shut it down and deal with it. Similarly, when I looked at what happened last night in San Fernando with Ramco, I mean, I can't find words to describe it. That place would have been shut down from Papi Road on one side and on Cipero Street on the other side. No traffic at all. Because, I mean, it could have been mayhem there last night if things went south. And with respect to, I make a comment that we didn't have serious catastrophes like similar to that in the past. Yes, we did. I don't know if you are old enough to remember the fire at the Bird in Pointe-à-Pitre.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Where 14 people would have lost their lives. Yes?
Okay.
And then we had the diving issue. So clearly, as a country, we are not prepared. Preparedness is what is important, and we're reactive more than proactive. You know, a plant like that in the beginning, at the onset, where is OSHA? Where is the EMA and everybody? We need to find out if they had the proper approvals for these things. How tongue and country could approve something like that in the middle of the city, basically. That has to be madness. That has to be madness at the highest order. And we have to fix it. And the way to fix it is to move the residents or move the plant. Because we can't continue to go along and hoping something doesn't happen. In the industry, things will happen from time to time. So you have to take corrective action once and for all, my brother. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Carl. I'll just say this, on the side of the citizens, if it's not something that directly affects them, they're not going to necessarily look to learn lessons from it. So the Paria situation, that's not something that citizens are going to take note of. Oh, we need to be careful in other things, because we're not divers, right? We don't live next to a diving bell. That's not going to affect us in that way. So when it comes to this Ramco situation, they're not going to kind of like, oh, you need to be careful in industrial areas because of that. I think you said a Pointe-à-Pitre fire. Sometimes also when tragedies are too far apart, you know, what one generation learns, the next generation kind of starts to forget because it didn't happen to them directly, right? All right, we need to wrap up really fast. I'll just say you can't shut down the prison service or police. So I don't know exactly what you meant by that statement. but it is what it is. I just want to point out, one of the things I want to point out, note how the slow criminal trials affects remand. The remand yard affects the prison institutions, right? Because a lot of these problems are coming from remand, where they're not convicted prisoners. And then that is compromising the prison and compromising the punitive function of the prison, right? So it's one issue affects the next. And then that then now makes it harder to police. So it's one affects the next, affects the next, affects the next. So it's not just, oh, the prison has a problem.
So the cascading effect of one directly impacts the other. So it is not about dealing with it individually, because we have to treat with them simultaneously across the board, because this is a multifaceted situation that you have to treat with each organization, or each element of this as you mentioned, Sean, each element has to be addressed and has to be addressed simultaneously with each other. We can't say we're going to deal with one and leave the other, because one impacts the other.
So here's the thing, because I said this in previous budgets. If we want to gain something somewhere, we want to spend more money on something, we're going to have to sacrifice. And I said it before and I'll say it again, I am more than willing to sacrifice parts of the budget to increase the allocation to national security so that we have the resources then to implement the solutions. I am more than willing to do that because I think it'll pay off in the long run, right? And what is your principles that you live by? What are you willing to sacrifice? Whatever you're willing to sacrifice for, that's your values. That's your principles, right? If we're not willing to sacrifice our freeness goodies in the budget for national security, then we're not taking national security seriously. We have one last comment to go before we close the show. This is about the Interpol situation. And I understand on the surface where you want to say it's not a national concern, but it is on a couple of fronts. One, this was done to someone with a diplomatic passport of TNT. To some extent, we should know why, right? We need, as a country, as a nation, we should know why. But also, look, as the population, I think it's of interest to find out why this happened to Dr. Rowley. Was it for good reason? Was it for bad reason? That interests me. Did he do something he shouldn't have been doing? Or did somebody do something to him that they should not have been doing? And again, if it could happen to someone with a diplomatic passport, at some point, you don't think it can't happen to you?
And not an ordinary diplomatic passport. A former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and who has been a public figure for the past 40 something years, I think, yeah, 40 years plus, right? And has been a key figure in CARICOM. So
yeah,
this is
sets
just
a precedent.
Yeah, this is just not. Questions must be asked, answers must be given for us to understand transparency across the board. This is not politics anymore. This is about questions about national security and how the average citizen can be across the Caribbean. Something went wrong, and if it is that his name did appear or it did not appear, and somebody stopped the and he was because he was actually illegitimately stopped and questioned, there must be a reason why, and it is important that we know what reason. If the reason, I am simply saying, if the reason is of national interest, we should know. If it is not, and if it is malicious or vindictive or something like that, and that has to be cleared out, because at the end of the day, the implication of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Dr. Keith Rowley, a former Prime Minister, directly, and the government of Antigua, somebody has to answer the question why this occurred, why it occurred, and what is the reason why it occurred, and how it occurred. The public needs to know that it was not malicious or vindictive or targeting a former Prime Minister.
And until we do, there'll be members of the public that want to blame Antigua, Interpol, the government of TNT, and the TTPS, and maybe the Americans and whoever else they might want to throw.
And all the conspiracies that that would be lingering around it.
And that's why it is unfortunately of national interest. It's not just a private citizen getting a traffic ticket with demerit points.
No,
all right. Want to thank the callers, want to thank the commenters, want to thank Ashra for joining us once again and speaking on all these broad-ranging topics. Folks, we have to go. So this is Talking About on WESN, closing out the week. Just reminding you, have a good day. Make it a great weekend. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Perhaps if we had more national pride, patriotism, and a sense of duty, there'll be less corruption. Maybe. But nevertheless, never forget, it's nice to be nice. Be nice to everybody that you interact with this weekend. Don't think about what they'll give you in return. Pay it forward. And hopefully, we'll have a nicer society when we see each other next week. Bye-bye.
WESN.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private healthcare affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us